What's up, guys? Eric Coates here, out on another daily walk. It's starting to get nice out here where I live, and so hopefully these videos will be more frequent. But today, I want to talk about something new I'm learning, and maybe the reasons why I'm learning it and how I'm learning it. So recently I've got an itch to learn Ruby and Ruby on Rails. So a lot of people are like, why Ruby? Like that's a terrible language. It's such a small market share, and why would you do that? Spend your time, more in Java or C# or whatever it is. Well, there's a couple reasons, and I think this is an important thing for anyone out there that's trying to learn something or to get into coding. It's an important crossroads that you hit anytime you want to learn a new language or even your first language. And that is, what is the why, right? Why do you want to code? What is it that you want to do? Okay. And depending on your answer to that question will guide you into what you want to learn. So for me, I'm a web developer. Nothing but my bread like web development. What do I mean by that? I've done Visual Basic development. I've done VBA development. So things in Microsoft Access and Excel. Just not for me. It wasn't what I like to do. I mean, sure, I like figuring out problems and stuff, but I ain't like living within the constraints of Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel. So that wasn't really my thing. So, but if it was, right? If I was like, oh, I really want to make software fairly easy within, a database that's already set up for me, with minimal, having to do front end stuff. And I wanted to be able to talk to Excel and Word and Outlook. Dude, VBA might be your thing, right? I had no interest really in it. So for me, web development's the really interesting thing. And so for those of you who haven't been watching the channel before, my main language that I work in is PHP. The company I work for has a case management system built in PHP, so we host it locally. And they can do all sorts of cool stuff with it. It automates all sorts of day-to-day tasks, and it's pretty complex. So in general, I live in PHP world, and obviously along with web development comes JavaScript, so those two kind of go hand in hand, because if I'm on a page, and usually it's a combination of the two, right? If I need to have like something I'm currently working on is giving them a tools section where they can click a button and bring up a whole bunch of different tools, one of which is a calculator that calculates certain values, and then it can change things that the user inputs. So it's like 50-50, right? Because there's a lot of back-end API writing, but when the calculator's on the screen, it's not like I can refresh the page. So everything needs to happen in JavaScript there, but then the JavaScript is making calls to the database to get the data, and those are all written in PHP. So on a daily basis, I spend my time in PHP and JavaScript. But outside of work, so that's my 9 to 5, I also own EJ Web Design, which is a web design business, web development business. And most of what I do there is WordPress development, meaning like making custom themes and plugins and those sorts of things. Because most of the time, all I want to do is make the site for people and let them control their content. And so WordPress is a nice way to do that, and it gives the end user the ability to call in plugins and all sorts of stuff. So it's a little more flexible for the end user. So that's why I know WordPress. Now, I think I told you, but the thing I'm currently working on is learning Ruby specifically for Ruby on Rails. Now, why would I do that, right? Why would I not pour more time into Laravel, which is something I do. I'm not an expert in Laravel. If you said, hey, this app's in Laravel, swim, I'd be able to do it. I wouldn't be the fastest, but I can navigate my way around it. Mostly it's just kind of learning the built-in stuff, because Laravel is very abstracted away from base PHP. But the nice thing is you can write base PHP within Laravel. So if you ever get caught up and you don't know what to do, you can at least always fall back on the fact that you know PHP. But why Ruby, right? It's a completely different language. Anybody who knows, like every language that I've worked with so far, because I've never really worked with Python at all. But everything is pretty much a C-based language. So whether that's JavaScript or PHP, even some C#, they're all, even Java too. They're all C-based languages. Means like the biggest thing is code blocks are formed using curly brackets, right? Open curly bracket, close curly bracket. So if you want to call a function, in pretty much all of those languages, you need the keyword function, you pass in your parameters, right? And then you fit your code between the code block and you return something, right? A for loop, right? It's pretty much the same. You say for, or you say let, or you set your variable, $i equals 0. I is less than either count of something, or if you're in JavaScript, it's I is less than, whatever it is, dot length. And then semicolon I++, right? That's how a for loop is going to work. And it's pretty much the same through all those languages. Ruby is very different. Ruby's very different. Like it's actually kind of cool. I kind of like it, but it's so foreign to me. But the reason, before I get too far down that path of explaining, Ruby and the differences, all that stuff, I want to say the reason I want to learn it is, as a web developer, right? I know PHP, I know JavaScript, I know React, I know all these different things, and I know WordPress. And WordPress is what people want. So I never once had somebody that was like, this website that you're doing for me needs to use React. Never once has that come up. People don't care. People don't care what I build it in, as long as it's awesome, right? And as long as it looks good and it functions well and does what they need to do to get their life. And for most clients, WordPress is what they're going to want, right? They want to be able to put up a blog post. They want to be able to change pictures out on the site fairly easily. So WordPress is really a good choice for them. Ruby on Rails, if you did not know, is what Shopify is written in. And that's why I want to learn it, right? Because when you think about it, right? So Shopify, what's on Shopify? Businesses that need a website to make money, right? So up to this point, I've done a couple WooCommerce sites, and I don't really love WooCommerce. It's okay, but I feel like it's kind of gimmicky, and I feel like it kind of nickels and dimes people. I didn't use Woo Payments or anything like that. I set all my users up through Stripe. Anyone that has a store through me, I'll do Stripe instead of trying to use Woo Payments and stuff, because I don't really like the whole way that they do stuff in WooCommerce. But irrelevant, because I want to learn Ruby on Rails for Shopify. And yes, doing websites for information, doing websites for contact information, and being, hey, I show up on a map and people can find my business. Great, you need a website. However, you don't need it as much as somebody who sells stuff through the website, right? Online retail is huge. And one of the best places for people to go and have a website, a really, solid website, is through Shopify. And so I personally want to learn Ruby on Rails so that I can start selling Shopify websites. So that's why I'm doing it. And I think it makes a lot of sense, right? Because look at what I know. JavaScript, PHP, WordPress. The natural next thing for me to learn really and learn well would be Shopify. Now, maybe people would say hey, Laravel is a good thing to learn. Why don't you learn some more Laravel? Dive deep into Laravel. And they have all sorts of plugins and stuff that you can use for, different things. And they have their own APIs for payment. And yes, it's all true. But at the end of the day, if somebody says, hey, I want a Shopify website, plus you have the ecosystem for a site, that's already a commerce site. And people are much more willing to spend money on the thing that makes the money than they are to spend money on things that just raise awareness, right? So to me, Shopify makes a whole lot of sense. And learning Ruby on Rails comes with that. So that being said, as I was saying earlier, how am I learning this, right? Well, there's a couple ways people go about this. One way is they go through tutorial hell. And tutorial hell means that you watch tutorial after tutorial after tutorial after tutorial, and you spend all the time in the cerebral part of learning language. And you look at it like, oh yeah, I get it. But then you go to write a line of code, and you're like, wait, what am I supposed to do? Every coder's been through it. Every programmer knows. So what I did was, first thing was I got Ruby installed. I'm like, all right, let's install Ruby. Now, I have a Windows machine as my main work machine, but I also have a Mac, and it was easier to install Ruby on a Mac. I think it's already on the Mac, but had to update it and upgrade it, and broke some things on the command line. There was one library that it used, and it was out of date, and then it threw off my version of PHP and stuff. So it was kind of annoying, but I got it fixed, and I know what happened. So the next time that I go to do that, I know what went wrong, But the first thing was I got it installed. And once it was all installed, I installed Rails. And I started clicking around the framework to see how everything's built. And the thing is, it's built in MVC, which is something I'm familiar with, right? MVC stands for Model View Controller. So if you're not familiar with MVC, simplest terms, M stands for model. Model is typically what your database table will look like, right? So let's say, you want to have a users table with a username, password, yada, 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 right? Well, you use that model to tell the database what you actually want, and then you pull that in. So you'll extend that model into the controller that you're using. Now the controller, so that's the C part of MVC. So before we get there, we'll do V. V stands for view. View is what you see, right? Makes sense. So view is the HTML, the CSS, the stuff that you're going to see on the page itself. And then controller is where your logic works, right? So your controller takes care of all the other stuff, setting the variables, doing all the different stuff. Controller takes the job of possibly, running. So if your route calls for, if your route is named one thing, it runs the function that is in the controller, and then returns the view. So the controller goes and says, okay, get all the stuff for the database, okay, set it to variables. We're going to pass it to a view along with all of the, sorry about the wind here. We'll pass it to the view along with, let's try to let the wind die down. We'll pass it to the view along with any of the variables and the stuff that you're going to need from the model from the database, right? So Ruby on Rails uses MVC. And as I was clicking through it, it was very similar. Some distinct differences, but it's pretty similar to Laravel, right? You make scaffolding, you migrate your scaffolding, which sets up your pages the right way, which allows you to return everything. So all I'm doing is going in there and trying stuff, right? Change something here, change a piece of code here, see what that outputs. And that's the way that you're going to learn how to do stuff, right? Just like in carpentry. trying to kill this wind here. But just like in carpentry, let's say you want to build a shed in your backyard, right? That's what we're all about, building a shed. Well, you can watch a YouTube tutorial and they can tell you, you know, how things need to be square and why they need to be square and show you how to make things square. But until you try to make something square, you're not gonna know, right? Until you make sure that the foundation of it is level, you don't know really how to do it. You need to get like your reps in. So for me, it's go in, click around. Now, as I was saying earlier, Ruby is very different from the language I'm used to, but it's kind of why I'm attracted to it as well, because it's like, although the syntax is different, right? So like instead of the word function, you name your function and then you put the keyword do and then end. So do and end are kind of like your curly braces, right? Instead of echo, like you would in PHP, you use puts. Puts will put out stuff into the console. So what I'm trying to say is, at the end of the day, the thing that translates over from any coding language, and that's whether you're Ruby, Python, PHP, JavaScript, C#, coding concepts are the same. They might work in a little bit of a different way, and in Ruby's case, it's very different from what I'm used to, but it's making me a better programmer. At the same time, I'm learning a new skill that I think will be really good for my personal business. It keeps me sharp. It lets me see things done in different languages in different ways. It makes me think and broadens my horizons, and also might make me see something a different way where it's like, okay, this is much more efficient to do things this way. I never realized that, you know, we could do it like that. So that's kind of the gist of it. Like I said, I'm learning Ruby. I might post more stuff on it because I think maybe I'll share some coding stuff, like just show you how you fall through these things. Like I think every coder out there, or every programmer thinks that if they don't get it within the first try, they're not getting it. That's not true. It's you gotta make mistakes, you know. And yeah, I'll watch a tutorial here and there on things, but following a tutorial isn't as helpful as when you hit a problem. You're like, wait a second, why the hell can't I do this? Why doesn't this work? And then you look up the answer. You're like, oh, I get it now. Because the next time, before you even run into a problem, you're just gonna know. You're just gonna know what it is. So I think the other thing too, and the last thing before I go, is I think it's important you learn things slow. Everyone wants to learn things fast. And I saw another video, man, I can't remember who did it, but it was brilliant the way that he was talking about learning and how you have to learn things slowly. Like he talked about the difference between learning theory and practice. And he said, anytime you practice something, it should be 5 times the amount of the theory that you learn it with, right? So if you every 1 hour of theory, you should have 5 hours of practicing. And what that does is it builds muscle memory, so to speak, right? So like anybody out there, the first time that you wrote a for loop, you really had to think about it, right? Now when you have to come to a for loop or a for each, you know exactly what to do. You don't even have to think, you know what the pieces are. And that's like a shortcut, right? And they compared it to like a block of wood and a toothpick. And once you have a skill memorized and a concept completely like right there in your long-term memory, it's kind of like a toothpick that fills the bowl, rather than taking so much mental strain as it's a wood block, right? You have to think about everything that you're doing. Kind of like driving, right? First time you drove, you're thinking about, oh, am I pushing the pedal right? Am I doing this? Am I doing that right? And now you get in the car, sometimes you don't even realize that you left the house before you're at where you need to be. It's kind of scary, but it's the truth, right? Same thing goes for coding. And then what happens is, as those things become solidified, you can open up yourself up to learning the newer concepts and the more complicated concepts. Handle them one at a time, get good at them, and before you know it, you're gonna look back and be like, oh, all this stuff is easy now. And before you know it, you'll have, in my case, hopefully I'll have some Shopify clients lined up, you know, and I'll be making more money on my side business, get even more freedom in my work life. So anyways, that's what I was thinking about on my walk today. Maybe I'll post some Ruby on Rails. If I get some comments here and people liking it and they say, hey, yeah, show us some stuff that you learn in Ruby Rails, yeah, we'll do it. We'll go through the installation maybe. We'll go through the whole shebang. But anyways, yeah, thanks for watching. This is Eric Codes. Like, subscribe. You can check out my podcast on Apple Podcasts. It's PH Podcast. Hey, have a good one. And posting this on a holiday weekend. So those that celebrate, happy Easter. And we'll talk to you soon. Peace.